My question was, I mean, that was basically a meaningless, useless war with, tons of destruction. So, I mean, is there, precipitated by,
I don't know.
basically maniacs?
I don't know that there is anything that's useless.
Well, I mean, is it possible to have things that are completely irredeemable? Is that possible in the scheme of things?
Well, in the most basic scheme of things, you live and you die. It's a matter then of how much choice or design you have over either of those. Yeah. So we're talking about your self-created destiny or not. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If you're on the spiritual path, then you've created whatever's coming down, so whatever it is. And it's up to you to do something about it, for or against it, or somewhere in between. So it's about conscious awareness. It's never anything less than that, no matter where you are, where you find yourself, in anything you want to call war, because the war is in your head. The war is in your mind. Your mind is the battlefield. That's the battlefield that leads you to any manifestation of a battlefield. So, then it's a projection of your own inner battlefield, so to speak. And the same goes for the opposite of that, which then is peace. See, the peace of the mind comes out and it manifests and projects itself upon the universe as peace of the world. And thus you have comments about the inner world, the inner determining sometimes what the outer is or what it needs. Whereas non-practitioners let the outer determine everything that goes on in the inner, so they become garbage cans, as most human beings become garbage cans of superficial but very powerful cultural influences. So then what you open to? If you don't open to the spiritual inner, then that doesn't play a part in your reality. If all you are interested in is culture and media, right, then that's who you are for the most part, until you move to a higher plane of consciousness and then start to reflect what that might be for you. And we are spirits first, spirits last. In the final analysis, you leave this plane of illusion and you go back to the spirit world, which is another illusion, more subtle illusion, right? But you may have less control over that than you do here, over this. It's a different universe, so you're subject to different laws because of that fact of the different universe. So, I'm listening.
Well, what about the, I mean...
You're not really asking a question, but saying, what about your mind? It's really, what about your head? And all the stuff that you allow to go through your head that determines your conversation, or your lack of conversation in this case. Because do you feel that realization is about your thinking, or do you feel that realization is about your knowing?
Oh, it's about knowing.
Knowing beyond thinking, in fact. Mm-hmm. 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 In fact, we would go even deeper to knowing beyond knowing. Because where the soul is, there's no head there. It's headless. The soul is not your head. It's not your ears or your face, anything like that. Anybody's, for that matter. The body is a manifestation of that reality that we've called as the essential core reality of heart essence, which some people call the soul. Yeah.
Is there a way that we as heads relate to...
I mean, it's non-heads. No, you're not a head. I just finished saying that. I just finished saying you don't have a head. Right? You have an ego that manifests as all appearances. See? And that's because of its function, see, which is to differentiate. Don't think so hard. The rest of your hair is going to fall out.
So, as egos, for example, instead of heads, how,
in other words, the machinery of the mechanical consciousness.
yeah, how as self-identified beings do we relate to this headless soul state on a day-to-day basis?
You have to do it by intuition or knowing better. Can you know better? Can you know any better?
Well, if you're not focused on the ego, that's a step in the right direction.
No, if you're not focused on the ego, you're focused on something else.
Well, I mean, if you're not focused on your own...
The idea is not to be focused at all. See, going beyond focus. What happens when you go beyond focus? Huh?
Things become a blur, I don't know.
Of course you don't know. Right, exactly. You're so busy in the focus, right? Out of focus, completely out of focus. Right. So too much mental leads you over the cliff, see? And you have to be pulled back from the cliff, see? Because you're so mental. See? That's all you can perceive. See? The mental is a lens. See? That's all it is a lens. For what? The word that you would be familiar with is S-O-U-L. Is that a lens? Is that a mental thing? No, you haven't seen anything related to it in that nature. So you have to go back to your earlier teachings, which represent a core wisdom that is probably better for you to stay in the spirit of. And we're talking about ancient wisdom, right? The inherited, sort of, let's say, yogic wisdom of certain traditions, perhaps Hindu traditions, or yogic traditions, even better, the yogic traditions. See, where it's not about self, mind, and body, it's about awareness itself. That's the real event, is awareness itself. Not all the garbage you add to it because you don't know any better or you don't care anymore than that. So when we practice and we get to the level of awareness, aware of itself, then we can move beyond perception. And that's what practice is about, moving beyond relative perception. And then not moving at all. Say, the cessation of movement, it's boom, being. Free of motion. See? And then that brings us to the edge of reality. Which is what should be behind music as we know it, but it isn't. Sociality is behind music as we know it, cultural music. Social goals, social programming, and the so-called relative name of work and survival, which are good concepts. Which are excuses for mediocrity in general. Put simply and directly. Right.
You have the relationship of Shakti and Kali, creation and destruction, or creative energy and destructive energy.
No, you have that. No one else has.
Well, I mean, it manifests in the world.
That's you. That's all you.
Well, I mean, everybody.
No. That's you talking. That's your mind, and nobody else's. That's your problem.
I didn't come up with the idea.
No. The idea came up with you.
It didn't come up with me.
It came up with you.
I'm trying to get rid of it, I'm trying. I said, don't take it back with me,
Okay. Yeah. Mm. So when we refer then to the concept of soul, capital S, not necessarily cultural soul, but super soul, we're talking about super intelligence, super soul, super awareness. It's incomprehensible. It's beyond God. It's beyond God. It's the beyond God, so to speak. We can say it's the no God. It's the no thing. And thus, the references to the infinite itself, the boundless, the incomprehensible. Reality, the everything, the all. No thing. See, without that, there's no practice, because there's no depth. There's nothing but your self-searching. See? Going around in circles with people and madness and sickness and mental issues, emotional issues, human suffering. There's no enlightenment. None whatsoever. Not even a stitch. Not even a speck. So the vastness is the proper domain. That's the proper disposition. Infinite vastness. Put in conventional terms, the mind of God is the mind of any use. If there was such a thing. If there could be such a thing. See, so without this open-endedness, I mean, I would be playing with everybody else plays. To no satisfaction. I get the greatest satisfaction out of not knowing what it is, and not putting anything on it, and letting it, as I said earlier, come through for itself. That's a spiritual aspect. Not you, but it. That's it. That's spirit. Not yourself, but soul. Not the finite, but the infinite. As such. And references thereof or their whereabouts. See, the openness. And so you have the hierarchies of all the traditions and all the philosophies that speak about the concrete, the abstract, and then the spiritual or the transcendent. And the transcendent then, to make a good point, has to do with the fact that you spend sometimes half of your lifetime, or maybe a little less, in unconsciousness. Absolute unconsciousness. Which you must go into every night, into profound, deep unconsciousness, or you won't live. So you live out of your unconsciousness. So, people don't think about that. It doesn't matter to anybody. Everybody's so asleep, they don't think. They don't know the unconscious. So if they don't know the unconscious, they can't know the conscious. And if you can't know the unconscious that can't know the conscious, then you can't know the superconsciousness. Which is the point of the whole thing.
There are some traditions that have kind of magnificent depictions of progression through different planes and past different,
Educational.
Yeah.
It's what a teaching is all about.
And it seems like you've said or inferred many times that this level of goneness, unconsciousness, super soul is here now, and
inaccessible to most people.
Why is it inaccessible to most people?
Well, you tell me. You're asking about it. It's your question. Why are you having a question? See, if you already know.
Well, maybe he's asking why is it this?
No, he probably isn't. I thought I'd help you out there.
Is the step into that state of consciousness?
The step has already been taken. Yeah. But it is by nature and by habit avoided. Say, strategically.
So, avoiding an already taken step. Wow.
It's quite a paradox. Quite a dilemma, in fact. See? You've heard it said in certain traditions, the God realization you're looking for you already had, but you missed it. And it's true then in the psychic realms, similarly, if you are caught, let's say once you leave the body, and you are stopped in the astral worlds, and they say, well, and you say, oh, well, this is what happened to me, this is what it was. And they say, oh, but you don't remember this? You don't remember seeing and hearing this? We gave that to you, but where was your head at that point? Where was your mind at that point? And so you had it all, but you chose not to respond to it. You stayed asleep on it. Which is frightening, but it is true. We've all received it, we've all heard it deep inside, but we've ignored it. So you pay the price for ignoring it. That's your life. It's what you do and what you can't do, what you have done and what you haven't done. So all of that. When you consider any of this from the viewpoint of the spiritual traditions, they'll say, come in, go in. I'm not really saying go in, because then that's a big question mark. Where's the in? Because we are already the in and the out and everything in between. So it's not a fair comment, really, but they say you have to go inside. Meditate in. Jesus even went as far as saying, the kingdom of God is within you, right? But then he focused on the Father in heaven and going up to heaven, but the kingdom of God, Jesus, which is it? Within you or up there? It's both. And neither. Then we have enlightenment, wisdom. Crazy wisdom. Then there's no world. There's nothing else. Except that. Come in.
Seems like definitely Eastern traditions and even a lot of Western traditions focus on some form of, call it meditation or prayer or sitting still. And
we're talking about the practice of openness. Just being open, vulnerable to the Spirit, in resonance with the spirit of openness. Every tradition, Sufi, Islamic, Christian, Hebrewic, all of them, Hindu, African, Alaskan, whatever. Yeah. It's all about receptivity, because every night you go into unconsciousness, and yet every night when you're going into unconsciousness, you're also passing through the opportunity to have superconsciousness. Superconsciousness is the answer. Your God nature is what you're looking for at all points. It's not outside you. It's not in the mirror. The God nature is not in any mirror. It's not in your flesh, let's say, more than it is in your atoms. See? It's every atom. But if it's your atoms, then it's the atoms of the universe. If it's the atoms of the universe, then it's all beings. If it's all beings, then it goes back to the point. Enlightenment has to do with all beings. Right? May all beings be happy. May all beings be free. May all beings be enlightened.